Well, it all started when I answered an ad for this lathe. Hi, this is Zeke with Odd Job Fix, and I have a brand new workbench. So I'll tell you the story about the lathe in another video. But here you can see the thing is filthy. So I have a lot of work to do. I hadn't planned on using the lathe on this bench. I was just going to see what I could do with the bench. Now you can see it's nice and thick. What that is 2¼ inch pine with oak flooring on it. Unfortunately, there's quite a bit of damage. So I removed the what turned out to be flooring. Now I don't know if it's as old as the lathe. The lathe was 1944, but this said Bruce, made in the USA, tongue and groove, 2-inch by 1/2 inch thick oak flooring, which was nailed down to the aforementioned 2¼ inch pine. So overall, it's 2¾ inch bench, weighed well over 100 pounds. So I made some new strips and I put them in, and rather than making the tongue and groove, I just went ahead and made grooves and then cut splines. So I made grooves like that and avoided having to cut the tongues on the table saw. So I put these down. Each one had a spline in between, just as if it had been a tongue. So this is going to be my workbench. It's got a nice woodworking vise. It's got a nice tool chest below. I've got plenty of room for table saw accessories, such as push sticks and blades, etc., etc. So it's going to work out real fine, because with the bench on there, it's even more stout. It's even more heavy. This thing does not move. I want to talk a little bit about sanding. I did an incredible amount of sanding. I started with a really rough grit. There was no point in trying to strip it. There was no point in trying to scrape it. It was just completely soaked with oil, and I had to grind off a lot of material in order to get even to this point, and it's not going to get any better. So I worked my way down to about 220. Now let me show you this tongue again. As you can see, it's off center, and it's a little bit lower. In other words, the top is on the right-hand side facing down. So that allows you to sand a nice floor, like 1/2 inch floor, at least a couple of times installed in a house. And in my case, I needed some of that in order to get all that grime off of there. So what I'm doing here is I'm just demonstrating that simply brushing the sawdust away or blowing it with an air gun is not sufficient before staining. You really do have to use a tack rag. Tack rags just do something magic that it doesn't happen with any kind of brush that I know of, or as I said, compressed air. It seems like you're just bringing up more dust out of the groove. So what you want to do is just get that surface as clean as possible, and then you can begin with the staining. I've been staining for years, and I've never been happy with the colors that are packaged in stains as you buy off the shelf. So I always end up doing a lot of experimenting and seeing what's going to look good. This is a piece of scrap red oak, and as you can see, I've just daubed stain on it randomly here and there. And I was looking for a color that was going to complement the dirt that's embedded down in the oak in that bench, and not try to make it look any fancier than what it's really going to be. So I ended up using a couple of different stains, one of them being red oak, which has nothing to do with oak as far as I'm concerned. It's far too brownish, grayish, whatever. So in the foreground there is some stain called gunstock, and that's too red. So if you take the one that's just to the right and behind there, it's a little bit greenish, as you can see, and that bright red, and you put them together, you end up with a pretty neutral tone. And this is the tone that I went ahead and used to stain the bench. Stains behave differently, and this is an oil-based stain, so it's a fairly cool day, so I have plenty of time to work with it. Nevertheless, I'm going to keep my stain on a newspaper so that any drips don't have an extra amount of time in order to darken the surface, because sometimes those drips just don't come out. So I'll start at one end, and I'll wipe the stain in about as much as it can take, and then let it set for a while, and then take off any excess. And I have reason to believe it's going to take just about all I can give it. So just go ahead and stain, work with the grain, and try to keep a wet edge. Keep a wet edge, and just start at one end and work to the other. I want to add, actually, that in the foreground you can see there's a header strip that matches the header strip that's near me. That wasn't there when I got the bench. So I ran a saw along there with a straight edge and put that header strip in to balance out the bench altogether, and also to help hold down the new portion, which is in the foreground here to the left. So again, there's a lip underneath that header strip that holds down. And believe it or not, the old bench was put together with brass slotted screws. So I took the trouble to go to the hardware store and get some brass slotted screws, and that's the ones I installed. I think there's a shot later of me putting that in there. Now that drip that you see there, that's one of the things that can be a problem a little bit later on. I can't see that from where I'm standing, but when I get over there, that drip may actually be a little darker and hard to mask off. We'll have to see. Well, it looks like that drip over the far side, or actually the near side, didn't present a problem after all, so I was lucky there. As I said, it's a cool day, and the stain is kind of slow. Now the new part turned out a little bit lighter, so I'm actually cheating here. I'm just trying to overlay a little bit of stain, get a little bit more tone. This really doesn't work. You really need to wait and maybe even put a sealer coat between the two coats in order to tone it. But I'm going to give it a shot anyway. It's a workbench. What can I say? I've let this sit for a good 30 minutes or so, and I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the excess. There isn't too much excess, but I'm wiping it off. Now I should be going diagonally across the grain, but I'm going with the grain. I'm picking up a little bit of the color, but I actually had used a wood filler in between that I didn't show, and that filled in the gaps between the wood and helped fill in some of the grain of the oak. The ultimate finish here is going to be tung oil. I'm going to put a coat of tung oil on it frequently, maybe even once a week. I want to be able to renew this finish. This isn't a finish that I want to have a varnish on or something that's going to scratch. I want this to be able to take a lot of abuse and, as I say, be able to just kind of touch it up, put a little more stain on it like I'm doing right there. Still trying to color that in. It's not going to work. I need to seal it. But as I said, I was going to use tung oil, so I'm kind of running against myself here, because the tung oil is not going to penetrate very well if I put sealer on it. So I'm doing the best I can. It's a workbench. And that old wood and the new wood are just never going to be exactly the same. But it's going to be plenty good for what I need to use. I'll go ahead and throw a little stain on that wood vise there and make it look a little bit better. I think I've got one coat of tung oil on there. I'm not sure, but I'm going ahead and put those brass screws in that I told you about. Those suckers are running 80 cents a piece these days, so I only bought just exactly as many as I needed, maybe plus one. So now I take a little bit of a chance power driving those being slotted screws, but I've done this so long, and I find that this angle drill, it's an oldie, but I find that having an angle drill like that gives me a lot more control on the head of the screw than using a regular pistol grip drill. I'm sure I'd slide out of the slot and just dig right into the wood. Again, it doesn't matter. That wood's going to get beat up over time, and I'll just fill it and put some more tung oil on it. Well, that about wraps it up. I'm going to go ahead and grab the camera here, still on the tripod, and take a little bit of a walk around this thing and show you how it turned out. It's not finished with the tung oil, and I did leave some holes from the old lathe in it. I figured, well, you know, someday I'm going to end up, there's one, going to end up bolting something down on the thing, so you know, might as well just leave the holes and have them handy to put a cleat down should I need to brace against that woodworking vise or whatever. Well, I want to thank you for watching. I would have really appreciated if you'd give me a thumbs up. I will note that I haven't made a video for 6 months and I've picked up 75 subscribers. I really appreciate that. I must be doing something right, so thank you much. And it'll be my privilege to see you on the next one.